Hello everyone, this video is going to be a review of the book Chatter by Kross. The full title of the book is Chatter, the Voice in Our Head, Why It Matters and How to Harness It. This is a book about how we think, how our mind engages with situations and our activities, and how that engagement can sometimes get out of hand, get out of control. And one particular way in which it can get out of control is with this problem of chatter. And so the book talks about the detrimental effects of chatter, how it can come about with the help of examples. And I really like that aspect of the book, that its use of examples to illustrate the problem. And it also offers ways of getting out of chatter and minimizing its detrimental effects. The book is written, as I said, by Kross, who is a professor of psychology and neuroscience, who has done a lot of research on pain, emotional pain, well-being, social media, the way we engage in social media and its influences on us, the role of perspective and shifts of perspective on our thoughts and feelings. The book contains a lot of his own research and other people's research, as well as many anecdotes that help illustrate the points in the book. Another strength of the book is that the problem of the book, the problem of the author, is quite clearly formulated, the problem of chatter. So let's begin with this word, chatter. What is chatter? To put it briefly, chatter is a problematic form of something else that is not itself always problematic. So chatter is a problematic form of self-talk. It's talking to ourselves. When it gets problematic, it becomes chatter. So from the very beginning, from the outset, we have this assumption that self-talk exists. It's always ongoing. It could be unconscious, but the proposition, the assumption that the author puts forward, that actually is the basis of all of the arguments and discussion in the book, is that we do self-talk. We talk to ourselves. So some of us might be skeptical about this proposition, this idea. And you might say, I don't talk to myself. Especially when I'm alone, I just think or I imagine. I don't self-talk. Which is why the author, Kross, has that qualifier occasionally in the book, that it's subconscious. It goes on below the level of our conscious awareness. But alternatively, if you're skeptical about this point, it is perhaps useful to say that something goes on. My cat is making noise, as usual, every time I'm recording a video. My cat also wants to join in. It is not self-talk per se. It is not an explicit form of talk, but it's something else is going on that is sort of like, it resembles talking to ourselves. So it's a kind of thinking that in some ways resembles talking. Another way of saying that is that our moods can be described as ways of talking. Or if you want to bring another field in psychology called discursive psychology, we can say that our moods, our feelings, our thoughts could be modeled as positions in a conversation or positions within a discourse. So self-talk might itself be a metaphor, might itself be a model. We sort of talk to ourselves. We think and imagine and explore things in our thoughts and feel, and we have moods that could be usefully modeled as forms of talking. To use a few other examples to just reiterate this point, a depressive mood can be described as a way of talking that is depressive. So what kind of talk that is it could be, the depressive mood is a talk about lack of possibility, or a talk about helplessness. I'm helpless, that my actions in my life has no consequence. So that kind of ongoing inner talk. By contrast, a joyful mood, which can also be described as a way of talking, is a talk about abundance and possibilities and all the reasons to be happy and joyful, including our connections with other people. So being depressive, being joyful, they can be described as ways of talking. Similarly, other moods like feeling fearful, anxious, these can also be described as positions in a conversation, as ways of talking. So when I'm fearful, I'm looking at a situation, I'm talking to myself that I'm facing now a situation which is a fearful situation, and I'm talking with myself about the reasons why it is fearful. So a negative mood, negative thought, a nagging, preoccupying feeling that doesn't go away why doesn't it go away? It doesn't go away because it's being maintained, actively sustained and maintained. We keep it around by rehearsing it, by constantly engaging with the self-talk that gives rise to those feelings and thoughts, which is why it seems like you're stuck in it. But we are stuck in a negative mood, negative feeling, negative thought, many times because we are engaging in a self-talk that is keeping all those negative things around. We have an active role to play in keeping ourselves in that position. Another term that is relevant here is rumination, which means going over the same material again and again. For example, you might take an exam, not do very well in the exam, and ruminate later. You can say, if I had studied better, I would have done better on the exam. But I didn't study, so I didn't do well in the exam. But if I had studied, I would have done better. But I didn't. So you keep going back and forth between the present situation and alternative hypothetical situations in which you didn't do poorly in exam. As you can see, this is a situation where the more you think about it, you cannot actually solve it by more and more thinking. Another example, you could post some photos on social media and say, people are not pressing the like button on my social media, on my photo. Why don't they do it? I wish I knew why they are not liking my photos, but I don't know. If I knew, I could have done something, but I don't know. So see, again, back and forth, being stuck. The author, Ethan Kross, provides another very dramatic example of his own, which has to do with a letter that he received, a threatening letter that posed apparently a threat to himself and his family. And he doesn't know what to do. He doesn't know exactly what the danger is and what to do about it. So he goes back and forth like, what should I do to prepare? I don't know what to do, but I know there's something. What is it? So again, this is not a situation where self-talk leads us anywhere useful, which is why it's kind of like a trap for our self-talk. And if we fall into that trap, we end up just ruminating and intensifying in our mood, in our thoughts, the problem. So these patterns are self-sustaining. It's like an infinite loop in the language of programmers. It's hard to get out of these infinite loops so the way to get out of them is you have to change the type of talk, the type of self-talk, or change the type of perspective you are taking on the problem. A related issue is the problem with focusing on what we cannot control, which is an issue discussed at length by Stoic philosophers. Things we cannot control include the past, other people, things that are under the control of other people, and unknown factors that are contributing to our problems. To get out of chatter, to get away from chatter, we have to stop that way of talking and to find a better way of talking to ourselves. Here's another important point from the book, something that is highlighted by the author, very important. The point is, just talking to somebody else doesn't necessarily help us with our chatter or our ruminations, because we might both get stuck in rumination. And here the problem is called co-rumination, when somebody else actually falls into our vortex of just endless going over the same stuff again and again without any productive outcome. So to end the discussion, the book offers a list of suggestions, a toolbox for dealing with chatter. And the general form of these solutions, if we step back to look at the form of these solutions, is that they all have to do with changing our perspective. The way we get stuck in a problem, a way of thinking that is counterproductive, is that we have an overly, excessively narrow view on it. So one way to deal with it is to try to adopt a different perspective that is broad, that takes a perspective of somebody who's looking at a distance from a distance at our problem. So these things the perspective can shift. The shift in perspective can be facilitated by things like looking at nature, looking at trees, natural scenes, presence of a loved one, or physical touch that somebody delivers on us. I guess that's the way of saying it. Somebody gives us a physical touch that is comforting. That one of the consequences of that is that it gets us unstuck from a overly narrow perspective. Other things we can do is we can do mental experiments like time travel, look at our situations from a distant point in the future. Or we can think about ourselves, look at ourselves as if we are someone else, imagining that we are talking about giving advice to a friend. We can also use our names in talking to ourselves. And that using your name, calling yourself, using your name when you're talking to yourself creates a distance that can also be very helpful. So in my own experience, I wanted to read a little bit more about the nature of self-talk, a deeper analysis of what it is, its characteristics and its development, the development of self-talk across lifespan, its relation to identity, in what ways self-talk is stable or transient, and the possibility of self-deception. So is it possible for us to use any of those tools, one of those strategies for getting out of chatter, while also deceiving ourselves? So I wanted to read a little bit more from a devil's advocate position. I would say that theoretically and conceptually, the book is not very strong. Part of that is probably because the book is written for a popular audience. And part of it is a general problem with academic psychology, psychological science, the so-called psychological sciences. And the general problem there is that it undervalues and is quite dismissive of conceptual analysis, philosophical analysis, and careful thought. And it wants to solve all the problems by data collection, which is why undervalue in psychological science, we undervalue and dismiss conceptual analysis, definitions, thinking, and just turn to collecting more and more data to illustrate everything. But aside from that, the book is informative, useful, and entertaining at many points. And you might find it useful if you like to overcome, if you're preoccupied at present with chatter and chatter-related problems. I would like to recommend 2 additional books for 2 different reasons. One of them is a book by Harré, the late Harré. The book is called Social Being. The second edition of that book was published in 1993. This book is a contribution to Discursive Psychology, the idea that a person is a self, an identity, can be described as a position in a dialogue, in an ongoing discourse. So if you like a deeper theoretical dive into that idea, that domain, I would recommend Social Being by Harré. Another book important for practical reasons is a brief and extremely helpful, to the point, book by Lee Baer, published in 2001, called Imp of the Mind. This is a book about a very practical guide in dealing with anxiety, rumination, and repetitive thought that seems to be out of control. All right, that's all. That's all for now. Thank you very much for your attention. If you have any comments, thoughts, if you have read the book, or if you'd like to read the book, any questions, please feel free to leave your comments below. Thank you.